The wind did not howl in Red Canyon. It moved low and deliberate, slipping between wooden storefronts and over abandoned porches like it was careful not to wake something buried beneath the dust. The town had once believed in its future. You could still see it in the faded paint on the general store window, in the cracked bell outside the schoolhouse, in the church steeple that leaned slightly east, like it had grown tired of holding itself upright. Then the railroad came. Not the steel. Not yet. Just the promise of it. Wooden survey stakes had been hammered into canyon soil 2 months earlier. Thin markers that looked harmless. Temporary. But they changed everything. Land that once belonged to ranchers suddenly belonged to negotiations, and negotiations in the West were rarely peaceful. Eliza Crow appeared at the northern ridge just before sunset. Horse steady, posture straight, eyes narrowed not from fear, but calculation. She didn't admire the canyon's beauty. She measured it. Distances between rooftops, line of sight from ridge to well, angles of shadow. She wore no bright colors, no jewelry, no unnecessary weight. .2 revolvers rested balanced at her hips. Her father had taught her that balance mattered. In shooting. In riding. In life, Thomas Crow had believed in fairness. He had also believed fairness required strength. That belief had cost him his life. When Eliza rode into town, no one greeted her. Men on porches paused mid-rock. A woman drawing water at the well looked away. The saloon piano stopped mid-note. Outsiders in Red Canyon meant one of two things: opportunity or trouble. Eliza tied her horse outside the Devil's Pour Saloon. The doors swung open slow under her hand. Inside, dust floated through golden light. Beams like suspended memory. 5 men sat at tables. One of them wore black, not preacher black, not undertaker black, cleaner, sharper, the kind worn by a man who preferred control. Wade Mercer. Mercer wasn't law. He wasn't outlaw either. He was something that existed between the two, a facilitator of outcomes. When ranchers refused railroad offers, Mercer visited. Sometimes they reconsidered. Sometimes they didn't. The ones who didn't rarely stayed long. Mercer lifted his glass slightly as she approached the bar. You're a long way from anywhere. Useful, he said calmly. Depends what I'm here for, she replied. Her voice was steady, low, controlled, not trying to sound strong, just naturally so. What's your name? Mercer asked. Eliza. Last name. She looked at him directly now. Crow. The air changed, subtle, but real. Mercer didn't blink, but the gambler beside him shifted in his seat. Thomas Crow. Mercer said slowly. My father. Mercer took a measured sip of whiskey. He was stubborn. He was honest. Mercer gave the faintest shrug. Sometimes. Those are the same thing. Not always. Silence settled heavy across the room. Eliza stepped closer to his table. They found him outside. Wichita, she said evenly. Hands burned. Shot twice. Mercer didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either. Men die out here every day. Not like that. She leaned slightly forward. He refused to sell his land. Mercer's jaw tightened just slightly. There were witnesses, she continued, in the West. Mercer almost smiled. Witnesses don't live long. 3 did. That was the first moment his eyes sharpened. You accusing me of something, Miss Crow? She didn't raise her voice. Yes. The word hung between them like a drawn revolver. That night, she didn't rent a room. She slept in the stable loft with her rifle across her lap. Her horse shifted once near midnight. That was all the warning she needed. Bootsteps. Below. Slow. Careful, not drunk. Professional. Eliza didn't move until the ladder creaked. Then she rolled, aimed through darkness, and fired once. The muzzle flash split the loft in white fire. A body crashed backward. Gunshots erupted from outside. Bullets tore through stable wood. She dropped from the loft instead of using the ladder. Hit dirt. Rolled. Came up firing twice toward shadow movement. A man screamed. Another rider fled into the dark. Within seconds, silence returned. But it was a different silence now, the kind that follows commitment. She knelt beside the wounded man. You ride with Mercer? She asked calmly. He spat blood. You should have left town. Who gave the order? Silence. She pressed the barrel gently against his shoulder wound that he gasped. Boone. He whispered. That name mattered. Even she knew it. Elijah Boone, former Confederate sharpshooter, railroad enforcer. They said he could split a playing card at 200 yards. They said he never missed. Where? She asked. Coming through tomorrow. Survey train. He passed out before finishing. Eliza stood slowly. The game had just changed. This wasn't about Mercer alone. Mercer was an arm. Boone was the rifle. And someone else pulled the trigger. The survey train arrived the next afternoon in a cloud of dust and iron. Children watched from doorways. Ranchers stood stiff and silent when the train slowed. A man stepped off the flatbed before it stopped. Moving, gray duster coat, rifle resting casually against his shoulder, movement precise, measured. Elijah Boone. That he scanned the town once, not nervously, assessing his eyes found Eliza near the well, locked. You're Crow's girl, he said without greeting. Yes. He didn't scream. It wasn't mockery. It was observation. She felt anger rise, but did not show it. You were there. Yes. Did you pull the trigger? A small pause. Yes. The honesty struck harder than denial. Why? She asked. He refused to sign. And that justified torture? Boone's expression did not change. It was meant to encourage cooperation. He was already cooperating, she said quietly. With whom? With what was right. Boone studied her. Most people he faced trembled. She didn't. You planning to kill me? He asked calmly. Yes. When you stopped looking for it. A faint flicker of interest crossed his face. Good answer. He turned and walked away, but he did not dismiss her. That mattered. That evening, Mercer found Boone standing on the northern ridge overlooking town. She's serious. Mercer said. Boone nodded. Slightly. She's disciplined. You underestimate her, and you'll regret it. Boone didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted his rifle and studied wind patterns. You ever question it? Mercer asked quietly. Question what? The scale of this. Boone exhaled slowly. I follow contracts. Mercer looked at the canyon. They're sending more men. Boone's jaw tightened slightly. For support? For transition. That word lingered. Transition meant replacement. Replacement meant expendable. Boone didn't answer, but something shifted behind his eyes. The next morning, smoke rose from Caleb Dorsey's ranch. Another refusal. Another example. Single shot. Chest point 300 yards. Precise. Eliza stood over the body, and for the first time since arriving, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from urgency. This wasn't a duel. It was systematic if she wanted to stop it. She couldn't just outshoot Boone. She had to outthink him. And whoever stood above him as the sun dipped red behind Canyon Stone. Eliza made a decision that would change everything. She would not hunt the man who never missed. She would make him choose. Dawn arrived slowly over Red Canyon. The first rays of sunlight cut across the ridges, illuminating the dust that clung to the town like a second skin. Windows reflected orange light. Horses stamped in their stalls. The town held its breath, anticipating the inevitable collision of wills. Eliza Crow had slept little. She had pored over every detail of the survey train schedules, every map Mercer had reluctantly handed her, every scrap of testimony she'd collected. Patterns emerged. Boone was predictable, disciplined, methodical, precise, but not invincible. He never acted without thought, which meant he could be outmaneuvered. She mounted her horse outside the stable. Leather boots clicked against the stirrups. Dust rose in lazy swirls around her. Every movement was measured. Every breath calculated. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was strategy. Mercer emerged from the saloon doorway, arms crossed, hat low over his eyes. His black coat flapped in the morning wind. You're going alone? He asked. Yes. Her voice was calm, unshakable. Boone's already observing you. I know. Mercer hesitated. His jaw tightened. You can't just confront him head on. He'll kill before thinking twice. And this town, this canyon, it's not just stakes for him. It's war for them all. She didn't flinch. Then I'll make him hesitate. Mercer looked at her, weighing her words against the silent danger surrounding them. Finally, he nodded. Just survive. Eliza rode north, following a ridge line that overlooked the narrow canyon pass where the survey team had planned to lay the new tracks. Boone had been sighted there earlier. She moved slowly, using the terrain to her advantage, sticking to shadows and depressions in the sandstone. Her rifle rested lightly against her saddle horn, but her revolvers were ready. From the ridge above, Boone observed that he was alone. Always alone. The rifle resting on his shoulder, eyes scanning, mind calculating. When he saw her silhouette on the lower ridge, he did not immediately raise his weapon. He did not fire. Something in her stance told him she was not merely another threat. She was deliberate, patient, dangerous in a different way. "You're Crow's girl," Boone called down. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. He didn't scream, he observed. "Yes." The wind carried the words between them. Boone tilted his hat slightly, as though acknowledging her resolve. Then he stepped aside, giving her the chance to approach, but not lowering his guard. She advanced slowly, every step deliberate. She knew Boone had the advantage of the high ground and distance. He had the patience to wait for the perfect shot. She needed to be unpredictable. "You could shoot me now," she said softly that he didn't move. "And miss." Her pulse quickened, but she didn't show it. "I have a plan." Boone's eyes narrowed. He had encountered many who thought they had plans. Most of them ended in smoke and dust. But there was something different about her calm, measured tone. He allowed a faint nod. "I'll see." That afternoon, the first volley of Blackridge's replacement enforcers arrived. Riders with precise movements, professional gear, and cold eyes. Their mission was clear: secure the canyon, enforce land seizures, eliminate obstacles. Boone observed them from his perch. Eliza watched from hers. Both were aware that these men were expendable, that the true power lay elsewhere, and that their lives were part of a larger chessboard. Eliza began setting small, subtle traps. Simple diversions that would draw the replacements into predictable positions. She wasn't out to kill them. Not yet, just to slow them, confuse them, force Boone to adjust. She needed him to see her ingenuity, to make him question his own certainty. Boone noticed immediately. Every misstep the replacements took was calculated, and he knew she was behind it. The way a leaf falls in the wind, the way the dust shifts before a storm. He observed her patience and precision, and for the first time in years, Boone felt a twinge of something unfamiliar. Respect. By evening, the town had witnessed unusual activity. False fires, sudden distractions, and reports of a ghost rider coordinating the defenses from unseen ridges. Mercer watched the movements with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Eliza had transformed Red Canyon into a maze, and Boone, for the first time, faced a situation where his predictability was being challenged. Night fell. The canyon glowed red under the moonlight. Eliza moved quietly along the ridge, her silhouette merging with the shadows. She had drawn Boone into a psychological game, a test of patience and skill. Every step she took, every movement of her rifle and revolvers, was a message. She could think, anticipate, and act in ways that he had not considered. Boone remained high on the opposite ridge, scanning, calculating, breathing slowly. He had spent his life believing in his precision, in the inevitability of his success. And yet, this girl, this crow, had forced him to pause, to consider, to calculate not just the shot, but the strategy, the human element. "Most people beg," he murmured quietly, almost to himself. She didn't. She never had. The wind shifted. Boone adjusted his scope. She moved with it, not directly toward him, but in ways that challenged his predictions. Every subtle motion was a test, a lure, a message. He didn't fire. He didn't need to. Watching her think, anticipate, and act was a lesson he had not expected to learn by the end of the night. Boone had made a choice. He would no longer follow orders blindly. Not because of loyalty to Eliza, not because of morality, but because he recognized that the game had changed. He had faced death before, but he had never faced someone who could force him to adapt, to question, to hesitate. He descended from the ridge just as the first hints of dawn colored the canyon walls. Eliza watched him approach from the shadows. She did not greet him. She simply observed, hand near her revolver, eyes steady. "You're bold," he said quietly. "You're predictable," she replied. That a silence stretched between them, filled with understanding. Boone could have fired. He could have ended this before it began. But he didn't. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we see if your strategy is as strong as your nerve." And thus began the psychological war. A battle of minds, patience, and skill. Not just for survival, but for control, for the future of Red Canyon, for justice, for closure. Neither would give ground. Both would test limits. And both understood, in ways no one else could, that this fight was not just about bullets or guns. It was about wills, principles, and choices. The canyon whispered around them. The wind carried the tension. And somewhere in the shadows, the railroad waited, impatient and inexorable, as the pieces moved silently toward the inevitable confrontation. The canyon waited. Its shadows stretched long and sharp across the cracked earth, reflecting the red-gold glow of the rising sun. Red Canyon was no longer just a town on the map. It had become a stage, a trap, and a battlefield all at once. Eliza Crow moved like a shadow. Every hoofbeat of her horse was measured. Every flick of her eyes scanned for angles and weaknesses. She had spent the night planning. Each ridge, each abandoned homestead, each dust-covered fence post could be used to her advantage. Boone's perfection was both a weapon and a vulnerability. Predictable patterns could be exploited. She dismounted at the northern pass, tying her horse in a way that left it ready to move but silent. Her revolvers rested in their holsters. The rifle she carried was her final card, reserved for moments that demanded precision. From above, Boone watched. Perched on a ridge like a hawk, he noted every shift in the dust, every subtle change in her posture. He didn't fire. He observed. For the first time in years, he was learning patience in a new way, not just through his own discipline, but by anticipating the opponent's moves. The first wave of Blackridge's replacement enforcers arrived shortly after sunrise. 10 men on horseback, dressed in crisp uniforms that betrayed neither fear nor familiarity with the land. Their orders were simple: secure the canyon pass, eliminate resistance, and ensure the survey could proceed without interruption. Eliza waited. They approached her position unaware, their confidence growing with each step. Boone saw the same pattern. He adjusted his position but did not fire. He had no orders that mattered anymore. Only observation. Eliza's plan was subtle. She needed no immediate bloodshed, just disruption. She knocked down a boulder near the trail. It rolled across the dry soil with a slow, deliberate clatter. One horse reared. Riders shouted. Their formation broke. She fired her first warning shot, not to kill but to force reaction. The sound cracked through the canyon, echoing off stone like a hammer striking metal. Men dove behind rocks and scattered. Boone noted her accuracy and timing. Perfect distance, wind considered, shot calculated to sow chaos rather than death. It was the first demonstration. She was no ordinary target. She was a strategist. A second volley of movement brought her face to face with the first serious challenge. One enforcer had regrouped, advancing along the ridge to flank her. Eliza turned, drawing her revolver. The man's eyes widened for a split second, the moment she needed. Her first shot hit the horse. It bucked violently, throwing the rider to the ground. Eliza fired a second, this time hitting the man's leg. He collapsed, screaming, clutching his thigh, incapacitated but alive. Boone exhaled slowly, appreciating her precision and restraint. She was smart. She was disciplined. She was dangerous in a way he had not anticipated. Mercer appeared from the shadows below, coordinating townfolk who had taken cover. He knew he couldn't intervene directly. She had to lead this engagement. By midday, the canyon was chaos. Eliza had drawn several of Blackridge's men into traps she had prepared: loose rock slides, sudden dust clouds to obscure vision, false escape routes leading into dead ends. Boone observed from above, impressed despite himself. He had never encountered a woman who could manipulate terrain with such understanding and efficiency. Finally, the first true confrontation occurred. Point 3 of the replacement enforcers cornered her near an abandoned ranch house. Their rifles raised, confidence in their eyes, ignorance in their hearts. Eliza raised her revolver. Calm, controlled. Come closer, she said quietly. They hesitated. One of them scoffed. A single shot rang out. The first man dropped. Not a mistake. She had accounted for wind, angle, and distance. The second man tried to retreat, but Boone's presence on the ridge forced him back toward her. Her second shot hit him in the shoulder, incapacitating without killing. The third man fired blindly. Dust kicked up near her feet. She rolled behind a fence post, and her rifle barked once. Precise, deadly, a textbook shot. The man dropped, chest pierced, dead before he could cry out. First blood had been drawn. But Boone did not flinch. He had watched, calculated, and noted every motion. Her skill impressed him. Her ruthlessness, restrained by principle, intrigued him. As the smoke cleared, Red Canyon's surviving townsfolk began to emerge. Mercer coordinated them quietly, using barricades and cover. He understood now that Eliza wasn't just a force. She was the tactical leader the town had lacked. And Boone was reassessing everything he believed about precision, about control, about loyalty. Eliza approached the edge of the canyon where Boone had been observing. "You're impressed," she said softly. Not looking up. "I'm assessing," he replied. "You're more dangerous than I anticipated." "And you?" she asked. "You're the man who never misses. But will you act?" Boone's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm choosing my moments. And when I force you to choose." He didn't answer. Not yet. That night, as Red Canyon lay quiet under the moon, both observed one another from opposite ridges. Boone cleaned his rifle meticulously, studying every shot he had made that day, every calculation he had misjudged. He had underestimated a woman. Not the first time he'd underestimated men, but the first time he had misjudged someone in principle. Eliza sat with her rifle across her lap, watching the faint glow of the distant train tracks. She had survived the first day of confrontation. She had drawn blood. She had proven that Boone's precision could be challenged, that Blackridge's forces were fallible, that the canyon itself could be used as a weapon. The psychological war was no longer theoretical. It was real, and both understood, in ways neither wanted to admit, that the next day would demand even more. Boone would have to act. She would have to anticipate. And Red Canyon itself would be the battlefield that determined who survived. Red Canyon never truly slept. Even as the moon climbed high over sandstone ridges, the town's residents huddled behind barricades, listening to the wind whistle through cracked windows and empty streets. The events of the first blood had left them shaken. Horses whinnied in stalls, chains rattled against posts, and distant coyotes howled in response to some unseen predator. Eliza Crow moved quietly along the northern ridge, her eyes scanning every shadow, every ridge line, every subtle movement in the dust. Boone observed her from his perch across the canyon. Neither spoke, neither acted. Yet in silence, a new understanding was forming. They were no longer simply hunter and hunted. The chessboard had changed. The morning brought smoke from the south. Blackridge had sent reinforcements. 20 men, more experienced, faster, ruthless. They came not just to enforce the railroad's claim, but to eliminate the anomaly. Eliza Crow, the girl who had dared disrupt Boone's perfection. Boone adjusted his scope. He studied the men, their spacing, their approach, the angle of their rifles. For the first time, he hesitated. Not because he doubted his skill, but because he knew that the girl, small, silent, invisible to most, was somewhere in the canyon with him. Eliza moved like water, flowing between ridges, slipping behind abandoned wagons and broken fences. She left small indicators, subtle traces meant only for Boone's eyes. Dust kicked a certain way, small flashes of light reflecting off metal, a footstep out of rhythm. Boone understood immediately. She was forcing him to track her, not to kill her. Not yet. To anticipate her moves. The first clash came near the old mill point. 2 men rode ahead of the main force, scouting. Eliza had set a trap, a loosened boulder perched precariously above the narrow canyon path. One man approached, rifle in hand, confident, unaware. She whispered a word to herself, a rhythm of calculation, and the boulder rolled. It struck the first rider, throwing him against the canyon wall. His horse bolted. The second rider turned, rifle raised. Eliza fired twice. The first shot grazed his arm, the second hit the horse. He crashed to the ground, cursing, shouting, alive but incapacitated. Boone watched. He noted every shot, every calculation, every choice. She was precise, controlled. Every action measured to maximum effect with minimum risk. He considered intervening, but something told him to wait. Let the canyon teach her. Let her prove herself. By midday, the reinforcements realized they were being manipulated. Their formation fell apart. Dust clouds, subtle gunfire, sudden decoys. It was as though the canyon itself had risen against them. Boone moved, too, taking careful shots from high ridges, neutralizing threats without exposing himself. Eliza's traps funneled the men exactly where she wanted them. Finally, she confronted one of Blackridge's lieutenants directly. He raised his rifle, expecting her to hesitate. She didn't. 2 precise shots. His rifle clattered to the ground. Boone noted the timing, the rhythm, the speed of her execution. "You're forcing me to change," Boone whispered to himself. She heard him, though she didn't acknowledge it. She had no reason to trust him. Yet in the silence between shots, in the dust-filled air, an unspoken partnership emerged. Mercer coordinated the town's defense from the streets below. The townsfolk had become soldiers of necessity. Wagons were used as barricades. Fires were lit to obscure sightlines. Children and women were hidden in cellarways. Eliza moved between ridges and streets, directing both Boone and the townfolk. Each decision mattered. Every step, every shot, every word could tip the balance between survival and annihilation. The reinforcements were ruthless, but disoriented. Boone's presence forced them to anticipate threats they could not see. Eliza's manipulation of terrain forced them to fight blind. Within hours, half of Blackridge's new force lay wounded, scattered, or dead. The psychological pressure was crushing. Both sides began making mistakes. Boone's precision, once infallible, was now challenged by uncertainty. Eliza's patience, once a strategy, became necessity. Night fell over Red Canyon. Fires from the battle cast long, trembling shadows. Boone and Eliza met briefly on a ridge overlooking the town. "You've changed the rules," he said quietly. "I haven't changed the rules," she replied. "I just play by them better than they do." "You're reckless," he countered. "Calculated recklessness," she said. "And so are you." A long silence followed. Boone studied her. For the first time, he considered that she wasn't just an opponent. She was an ally, an equal in strategy. And that realization unsettled him. "Tomorrow," he said, "we finish this, one way or another. And if we fail, then the canyon dies with us." Neither flinched. In the early hours, before the sun rose, Mercer discovered the final move Blackridge had planned, a mounted cavalry unit to flank the town and destroy every barricade. He relayed the news to Eliza. She didn't panic. She smiled faintly. "The trap is ready," she said. Boone observed her from a ridge. She was preparing to turn the canyon itself into a weapon. Every path, every ridge, every shadow was accounted for. Even he, the man who never missed, could be forced into vulnerability if she executed her plan correctly. The canyon waited. Silent, so did the town. And so did destiny. Dawn broke over Red Canyon like molten gold spilling across sandstone ridges. The air was thick with tension, dust, and smoke from the previous day's skirmishes. Every shuttered window, every wagon barricade, every loose stone on the ridge felt alive. The town was no longer a quiet outpost. It had become a fortress, a chessboard, and a trap, all in one. Eliza Crow rode the northern ridge, her horse steady beneath her, every step measured. Her revolvers were holstered, her rifle slung across her back, ready. Mercer had organized the townsfolk as best he could, using wagons, fences, and stone walls as cover. Boone observed from his high perch. For the first time, he wasn't just calculating shots. He was calculating trust. And he knew, with every fiber of his being, that Eliza Crow was the most formidable mind he had ever encountered. The final assault would come from Blackridge himself. The railroad mogul had sent his elite enforcers, trained sharpshooters, and a mounted cavalry unit. Their goal: annihilate the town, seize the land, remove the girl, and silence Boone. Eliza waited until the cavalry emerged from the eastern pass. Then she acted. A boulder dislodged, rolling down the ridge, scattering the first wave. Dust clouds rose, hiding movement. Boone fired precise, disabling shots from the ridge opposite hers. Together, without a word, they orchestrated a deadly ballet of confusion and disruption. The cavalry split into small groups, trying to flank the town. Eliza used the terrain to funnel them toward prepared ambush points. Mercer and the townsfolk fired from behind barricades. Horses reared, riders fell, dust and blood mixing into a storm of chaos. Boone and Eliza did not target innocents. Their bullets struck only the aggressive, the relentless, those who came to kill, not to negotiate. Every action was calculated, each moment a demonstration of skill and restraint. At midday, the remaining enforcers reached the abandoned mill, the central point of Eliza's trap. She moved silently, weaving between shadows, her revolvers flashing in perfect rhythm. Boone covered her from the ridge, taking out threats before they could react. Then came Blackridge himself, riding with 2 bodyguards, arrogance in his posture, confidence in his eyes. He expected to intimidate, to cow the defenders, to assert control over the canyon. He did not anticipate Eliza. She emerged from the shadows, rifle leveled, eyes locked on him. Boone stepped down from his ridge, revolver ready. "You've killed enough men for your employer," Eliza said quietly, calm and steady. "I'm only doing what's necessary." Blackridge spat. "Necessary?" she asked. "Do you call burning a town necessary? Killing innocents necessary?" Boone spoke from behind her, voice low. "No more lives need to be lost. You're finished here." Blackridge fired first, aiming at Boone. Boone's reflexes, honed over decades, kept him alive. A single shot from Boone disarmed Blackridge's gun, sending it clattering across the dirt. Eliza took careful aim and fired her rifle. The shot precise but non-lethal, hitting the reins and forcing Blackridge's horse to stumble. The final confrontation was a demonstration of everything Eliza and Boone had learned together: patience, precision, strategy, and moral choice. Boone could have killed Blackridge instantly, but he didn't. Eliza could have finished him, but she chose restraint. Together, they forced Blackridge into surrender. Captured by his own overconfidence and the trap he underestimated. By late afternoon, the dust had settled. Red Canyon was still standing. The survivors emerged from hiding. Horses whinnied. Children cried. Townsfolk cheered quietly, relief palpable. Boone stood on the ridge, rifle slung. Eliza approached him. "You could ride with us," she said softly. "I'm better alone," Boone replied. "Your father didn't scream," she said. He nodded. "He didn't. And neither did you." For a long moment, they simply watched the town, the canyon, the rail line rerouted safely. Then Boone mounted his horse and rode north, disappearing into the horizon. Eliza turned to the townsfolk. With Mercer's help, she began rebuilding. Not just structures, but the town's spirit. She erected a schoolhouse on part of her father's land, a symbol that survival alone wasn't enough. Change required courage, memory, and action. Years later, Red Canyon became legend. The sniper who never missed was remembered. The girl who forced him to choose differently was celebrated. And the story that lingered in every saloon and ranch house wasn't about the bullets or the guns. It was about the choices that defined courage. Because in the West, survival was not measured by skill alone. It was measured by heart. And Eliza Crow had plenty of both.